Welcome to Touch Technology Review. Today I'm going to be taking a look at this 135 L series f2 lens, which is a fantastic lens for portraiture and product photography. I want to clarify a couple of myths about it first of all, and that pertains mostly to the f-stop. Now, when you're out there shopping for a prime lens, most of us are looking at the 50mm 1.2, the 85 and this 135 as our go-to portrait lens. Now, the 1.2 aperture offered on the 50mm and the 85 at first appear very attractive because obviously the wider the aperture, the more amount of background blur. But as I've addressed in a previous video, sometimes opening down to the 1.2 gives you too much blur that some of your foreground subject matter actually becomes out of focus, in which case you find yourself shooting on f2 to 2.8 anyway. So the first myth to dispel is that the widest open aperture is the best. I actually believe that somewhere in between that is true, and I find myself shooting most portraits on f2 to f5.6 so that I can get the full portrait in focus and only have the background blurred. Occasionally I'll shoot down at 2. If I'm shooting at 1.2, I'm going to do so at the risk of getting some of my subject matter out of focus. When it comes to shooting still life, it's the same deal. I tend to find that I'll be shooting on 5.6 to 8 so that I can get the full scope of my object in focus. So I very rarely get to shoot down to 1.2 or 2 on this lens anyway. So that's my comment there. Certainly it's great to have 1.2, and that's why I have these other lenses, because I like to be able to shoot in the lowest possible light situations, and there are instances when I want to shoot 1.2. But for most purposes, for shooting portraits or products, the f2 is more than enough to give you sufficient background blur. The other myth, surprisingly, is related to the price point. Now, this is incredibly cheap at below $1,000 US for a 135 L series prime lens. The 50 1.2 and the 85 1.2 are much closer to the $2,000 mark, which gives the impression that they're better lenses. Now, in my opinion, they're not necessarily better. They might have more practicality because of their focal length, but this 135 really has a special feel about it when you're shooting portraits. So it's one you should consider. It's of premium quality, being an L series build. The lens elements are superb, offering a very sharp image. And also the other thing about it is that being a 135 focal length, there's a definite advantage when it comes to providing more impact of your subject matter, whether it's a portrait or whether it's a still life in the studio. The way it can just isolate that subject out of the background by virtue of that focal length is far superior to these other lenses. So in many respects, I find this to be the ideal portrait lens if you have enough space around you. So when you're dealing with outdoor portraits, fashion photography, there is no limitation there. You usually have plenty of space to work with, and this lens works really well. So I'm going to show you some samples of photos taken with this lens on screen, and also I'm going to take a few photos here in my studio with these ProPhoto lights behind me to demonstrate the capability of this lens at different focal lengths. I'll go from the f2 all the way down to the f32 to show you how well it focuses at each of these different focal lengths. So hopefully that will be useful for you if you're making up your mind as to whether you want to purchase this lens. So here we are. The first example is a portrait that I took of my youngest son in a location here in Melbourne called Montsalvat. It's a beautiful setting with amazing greenery around it, some historical buildings. So it's really quite a feast for photographers. And for most of the hour that I was there shooting, I chose to use the 135 lens, and I was pretty much confined to anywhere from 3.5 to f8 depending on lighting conditions. And as you can see with 3.5, all of the subject matter is in focus, a little bit of the railing in front of him is in focus, and the background is completely out of focus. Moving along to a fashion shoot in Collinwood, Melbourne. This one was again shot with the 135, and I chose to open up all the way to f2 to get maximum amount of blur. And as you can see in this next shot, we can really see that background blur coming into play with significant amount of bokeh, allowing us to focus completely on the subject. Moving along to the next image, as you can see, the iPhone, the hand and the zip are all in focus, but as you look further back, The model was on a slight angle to the camera, so the back arm is starting to become out of focus and starting to blend in with the background, which is perfect for this type of shot. But if you need to get everything in focus, as I mentioned earlier, you'd have to go to f5.6 or even further. So to give you an insight as to how this 135 lens performs when shooting at all the different f-stops, I've put together a still life scene, and I'm going to shoot from f2 all the way down to f32. So at f2, you can see here my object in the foreground, which is the one that I was focusing on. The Pentax camera is mostly on focus, and virtually everything else in the scene is considerably out of focus. If you go to f2.2, not much has changed here. f2.5, we're starting to see a little bit more focus in the other objects. But it's not until we get to about f3 that the image starts to change significantly and we start to get more focus in the other objects. Then if we go to f29 and f32, which is a very small aperture, as you would expect, everything is pretty much in focus, from all of the cameras to the books and even the window in the background. Thanks for watching. Hopefully that information was useful. If it was, hit that like button, consider subscribing to the channel, and you'll be notified of up and coming video releases. Subscription is free and it goes a long way into ensuring the ongoing success of the channel. Thanks again. See you on the next video. Bye for now.